The crash-landing metal groaned and sparked as Captain Marcus. Reed pulled himself from the twisted cockpit of his exploration vessel. Blood trickled down his forehead, and his left shoulder throbbed with each movement.
The ship that had been
his home for 3 months of deep space exploration was now a smoking ruin on the surface of Kepler 7. An uncharted moon orbiting a distant gas giant. Marcus stumbled through the debris-filled corridor, his emergency beacon flashing weakly on his wrist. The ship's artificial gravity had failed, making every step feel strange and light. He had been on a routine mapping mission when the ion storm hit, sending his vessel spiraling toward this unknown world. As he searched through the wreckage for salvageable supplies, a soft whimper echoed from somewhere deeper in the ship. Marcus froze, his hand instinctively moving to the plasma pistol on his hip. The sound came again, definitely not mechanical. Something living was trapped in his ship. Following the sound, Marcus made his way to what had been the cargo hold. Twisted metal and scattered equipment created a maze of shadows and hiding places. There, huddled behind a fallen supply crate, he saw her. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her skin held a soft, pearl-like luminescence that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. Delicate features marked her as clearly feminine, though her large violet eyes held depths of intelligence that seemed ancient. Her hair, a cascade of silver-white strands, was matted with what looked like blue blood. The alien girl pressed herself further against the metal wall when she saw Marcus, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. Her clothes, or what remained of them, appeared to be made from some kind of biofabric that shifted colors like oil on water. She was injured, with visible cuts along her arms and a deep gash on her leg that continued to seep that strange blue fluid. Marcus slowly raised his hands, showing his palms, in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Hey there," he said, softly, his voice echoing in the damaged cargo hold. "I'm not going to hurt you." The girl's eyes darted between Marcus and the various exit points, clearly calculating her chances of escape. When she tried to stand, she immediately collapsed. Crying out in pain as her injured leg gave way beneath her without thinking, Marcus moved forward to help her, but she recoiled violently, pressing herself so hard against the wall that he thought she might try to push through it. Her breathing became even more labored, and those violet eyes filled with what he could only describe as pure terror. Okay, Marcus said, backing away slowly. "I'll stay right here. You're hurt and you need help. I have medical supplies." He reached for his emergency kit, moving deliberately slowly so she could see every action. The girl watched him with the intensity of a cornered animal, ready to fight or flee despite her injuries. Marcus pulled out a basic medical scanner and held it up so she could see it. "This won't hurt you," he explained, even though he wasn't sure she could understand his words. "It just tells me what's wrong so I can help fix it." The scanner beeped softly as he pointed it in her direction from several feet away. The readings made him wince. She had internal bleeding, a fractured bone in her leg, and was showing signs of severe dehydration. Without treatment, she wouldn't survive more than a day or two. Marcus set the scanner down and began pulling out bandages and antiseptic. He placed them on the ground between them and then backed away again. "These are for you," he said, gesturing to the supplies. "Help with the bleeding." For long minutes, they stared at each other across the small space. Marcus could see the conflict in her expression, the desperate need for help warring with deep-seated fear. Finally, her survival instincts won out. With shaking hands, she reached for the nearest bandage. Building trust 3 days had passed since the crash, and Marcus had managed to create a small shelter from the least damaged section of his ship. The girl, who he had started thinking of as Xena after she had pointed to herself and made a sound that resembled that name, remained wary but no longer fled when he approached. Marcus had established a routine that seemed to put her at ease. Each morning he would leave food and fresh water at a safe distance from where she rested. He would then busy himself with repairs and salvage work, always staying within sight but never crowding her space. Slowly, incrementally, that safe distance had been shrinking today. For the first time, Xena accepted food directly from his hand. The moment their fingers brushed as she took the ration bar, Marcus felt a small electric thrill. Her skin was surprisingly warm and softer than anything he had ever felt. The touch lasted only a second before she pulled away, but he saw something shift in her violet eyes.
Marcus said,
As he settled down a few feet away from her. I never expected my first contact with an alien species to be like this. He gestured at their makeshift shelter and the alien landscape visible through the torn hole. Usually in the stories, there are grand speeches and formal protocols. Xena tilted her head, studying his face as he spoke. While she clearly didn't understand his words, she seemed to be learning to read his emotions and intentions through his tone and body. Language. Marcus pulled out his datapad and began showing her images from Earth, blue oceans, green forests, snow-capped mountains. Her eyes widened with wonder, and she leaned closer, fascination overcoming caution. When he showed her a picture of a sunset over a wheat field, she made a soft sound of appreciation and reached out as if to touch the image. Beautiful, isn't it? Marcus said, watching her reaction. That's my home. Well, was my home. I volunteered for this deep space mission. He paused, realizing this might be the first time he had admitted his real motivations out loud. I was running away from something, someone actually. Xena's attention shifted from the images to his face, those large violet eyes studying him with surprising intensity. There was something almost telepathic about the way she seemed to sense his emotional state. Her name was Alina, Marcus continued, finding it surprisingly easy to talk to someone who couldn't understand his words but seemed to understand his pain. We were supposed to get married, had the whole thing planned out. But she chose someone else, someone who could offer her stability. A life that didn't involve worrying about whether I'd come home from each mission. As if sensing his sadness, Xena did something that surprised him. She reached out hesitantly and touched his hand, her fingers lingering this time instead of pulling away immediately. The gesture was so gentle, so full of understanding, that Marcus felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. Thank you, he whispered, and though she couldn't understand the words, she seemed to understand the gratitude behind them. Over the following hours, they developed a simple system of communication. Xena would point to objects, and Marcus would tell her the English word. She would then repeat it back in her own language, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Marcus found himself looking forward to these exchanges more than he cared to admit. When evening came, they shared another meal. Xena had found some kind of local fruit that was safe for both their species to eat, and Marcus contributed some of his emergency rations. As they ate, Xena began to hum softly, a hauntingly beautiful melody that seemed to resonate in his bones. That's beautiful, Marcus said. And Xena's luminescent skin seemed to glow a little brighter at the compliment. For the first time since the crash, Marcus felt something other than desperation and survival instinct. Xena continued her gentle humming, and the twin moons of Kepler-7 rose over the horizon. He realized he was no longer thinking about rescue as urgently as he had before. Shared vulnerabilities weakened into their cohabitation. The relative peace of their routine was shattered by a sound that made Xena's skin pulse with rapid, panicked light. A deep, resonant howl echoed across the moon's surface, followed by answering calls from multiple directions. Xena immediately grabbed Marcus's arm, her grip surprisingly strong, and pulled him toward a narrow service tunnel at the back of their shelter. What is it? Marcus asked, though her terror was answer enough. She grabbed his plasma pistol and emergency supplies as she led him through a maze of twisted metal and rock formations. The howls grew closer, and Marcus could hear heavy footsteps, and the scraping of claws against stone. Whatever was hunting them was big, and there were several of them. Xena led him through increasingly narrow passages until they emerged into a natural cave system that extended deep into the moon's crust. They ran through the darkness, Xena's bioluminescent skin providing the only light. Marcus was amazed by her ability to navigate the treacherous terrain, leading him around pitfalls and through passages that seemed barely wide enough for their bodies. It was clear she had explored these caves extensively during her time on the moon. After what felt like hours, they finally stopped in a small chamber deep underground. Xena collapsed against the stone wall, her breathing ragged. Her leg wound had reopened during their escape, and blue blood seeped through the makeshift bandage. "Let me help," Marcus said, kneeling beside her. This time, she didn't pull away. As he examined the injury, in the dim light of her skin's glow, could see pain and exhaustion etched across her delicate features. As he cleaned and rebandaged her wound, Xena began to speak in her own language. Her voice was soft but filled with emotion, and even though Marcus couldn't understand the words, he sensed she was telling him something important. "I wish I could understand you," he said, his hands gentle as he worked. "I can tell there's so much you want to say." When he finished with her leg, Xena surprised him by reaching up and touching the scar on his forehead from the crash. Fingers traced the line with feather-light pressure, and her expression grew sad. She spoke again, and this time Marcus caught what sounded like a question in her tone. "You want to know how I got this?" he asked, and her violet eyes focused intently. On his face, "It's from the crash, but I have others." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a long scar along his forearm. "This one's from when I was 12. Fell out of a tree trying to impress a girl." Xena's expression shifted to something that looked almost like amusement, and she made a soft sound that might have been laughter. Encouraged, Marcus continued sharing stories of his various scars and injuries, using gestures and expressions to help convey meaning. When he showed her a burn mark on his shoulder from a training accident, Xena's expression grew serious. She lifted the edge of her damaged garment, revealing similar marks along her ribs. But these weren't from accidents. They were too regular, too intentional. Marcus's jaw tightened as understanding dawned. "Someone hurt you," he said, his voice low and angry. "Someone did this on purpose." Xena's skin dimmed to almost nothing, and she pulled her clothing back down. She spoke rapidly, her voice breaking, and Marcus could hear the pain and fear in every syllable. Though he couldn't understand her words, her meaning was clear. She was telling him about something terrible that had happened to her, without thinking. Marcus reached out and pulled her into his arms. She stiffened for a moment, then melted against him, her slight frame shaking with suppressed sobs. He held her carefully, as if she might break, one hand stroking her silver hair. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "Whatever happened to you, I'm sorry. You're safe now. I won't let anyone hurt you again." They stayed like that for a long time, two damaged souls finding comfort in each other's presence. In the darkness of the cave, with danger prowling somewhere above them, Marcus realized that what he was feeling for Xena had grown beyond simple protectiveness or even friendship. The thought should have terrified him, but instead, it filled him with a warmth he hadn't felt since before Elena's betrayal. Growing connection to weeks after taking refuge in the cave system, Marcus and Xena had found a rhythm that felt almost like domestic bliss. They had discovered a chamber with a natural spring and bioluminescent crystals that provided both light and warmth. Xena had shown remarkable skill at finding edible plants and fruits in the underground ecosystem, while Marcus contributed by hunting small cave-dwelling creatures with improvised weapons. Their communication had evolved beyond simple words and gestures. They seemed to understand each other on a level that transcended language, sharing looks and touches that spoke volumes. Marcus found himself studying the way Xena's skin patterns shifted with her moods, learning to read her emotions and the subtle changes of light and color. This evening, as they sat beside the warm spring sharing their dinner, Xena did something she had never done before. She began removing her damaged garment, letting the biofabric slip from her shoulders. Marcus immediately averted his eyes, but she made a soft sound that drew his attention back to her. Her skin was even more beautiful without the covering, marked with intricate patterns that seemed to flow like living art across her body. Scars he had glimpsed before were more extensive than he had realized, but they didn't detract from her ethereal beauty. Instead, they told the story of a survivor, someone who had endured and overcome. Xena stepped into the warm water of the spring, then turned and held out her hand to Marcus. Her meaning was clear, and after a moment of hesitation, he began removing his own clothes. When he joined her in the water, she reached out and traced the various scars on his chest and arms, her touch sending electric shivers through his entire seas. "Body, you're beautiful," he whispered, and though she couldn't understand the words, His tone conveyed the message. Her skin pulsed with soft, warm light, and she moved closer to him in the water. Their first kiss was tentative, exploratory. Her lips were softer than silk, and she tasted like the sweet fruits they had been sharing. When they broke apart, both were breathing heavily, and Xena's entire body was glowing with soft, rhythmic pulses of light. Marcus cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her luminescent cheeks. "I never expected this," he said softly. "I came out here to run away from love, and instead I found something more beautiful than I ever imagined possible." Xena responded by pressing closer to him, her hands exploring the planes of his chest and shoulders. The water around them seemed to sparkle with reflected light from her skin, creating an otherworldly atmosphere of beauty and intimacy. They made love there in the warm spring, surrounded by crystal light and the gentle sound of flowing water. It was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Xena was responsive and passionate, but there was also a quality of worship in the way she touched him, as if she couldn't quite believe he was real. Afterward, they lay together on the soft moss beside the spring, Xena's head pillowed on Marcus's chest. Her skin had settled into a gentle, steady glow that reminded him of moonlight on calm water. Marcus stroked her silver hair and marveled at how perfectly she fit against him. "I love you," he said quietly, and though she couldn't understand the words, she lifted her head and looked into his eyes with such intense affection that he knew. She felt the same way. Xena began to speak in her own language, her voice soft and musical. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but the cadence sounded like poetry. It's like a declaration of love in a language older and more beautiful than anything humans had ever created. As they lay there together, Marcus realized that being stranded on this alien moon might be the best thing that had ever happened to him. He had found something he didn't even know he was looking for, a love that transcended species, language, and the vast distances between worlds. But even as contentment washed over him, a small part of his mind couldn't help but wonder what would happen if rescue ever came. How could love survive when their two species might be enemies? For now, though, surrounded by crystal light and holding the most amazing being he had ever met, Marcus chose not to think about tomorrow. Love conquers. All the peaceful rhythm of their underground sanctuary was broken by the distant thunder of spacecraft engines. Marcus jolted awake to find Xena already sitting up, her skin pulsing with agitated patterns of light. Through the crystal formations above them, they could see the glow of landing lights against the night sky. "Rescue," Marcus whispered, but the word tasted bitter in his mouth. After 3 weeks of perfect isolation with Xena, the outside world felt like an intrusion rather than salvation. They quickly dressed and made their way through the cave system to a vantage point where they could observe the surface. What they saw made Marcus's heart sink. 2 different types of ships had landed near the crash site, sleek human vessels he recognized as military scouts, and larger, more organic-looking craft that must belong to Xena's people. Xena pointed to the alien ships and spoke rapidly, her voice filled with fear and urgency. She grabbed Marcus's arm and tried to pull him deeper into the caves, but he resisted. "Wait," he said, catching her hands in his. "You can't run forever. Maybe this is our chance to make things right between our peoples." Xena's expression was desperate as she shook her head. She spoke again, more intensely, and Marcus could hear the pain in her voice. Whatever history existed between humans and her species, it wasn't good. The decision was taken from them when powerful lights began sweeping the cave entrance. Voices echoed through the chamber, human voices calling his name, and alien voices that seemed to be searching as well. "Captain Reed," came a familiar voice. Lieutenant Sarah Hayes, his second in coming from the Exploration Division. "Captain, if you can hear me, we're here to extract you." At the same time, musical alien voices called out what must be Xena's name in her own language. The 2 search parties had found each other, and Marcus could hear the tension in both groups' voices. Xena clung to Marcus, her entire body trembling. Her skin had dimmed to almost nothing the way it did when she was terrified. Marcus made a decision that surprised even him. "I'm here," he called out, his voice echoing through the caves. But I'm not alone, and I'm not leaving without her. Footsteps echoed through the passage as both search teams converged on their location. Lieutenant Hayes appeared first, her plasma rifle at the ready, followed by 2 other human soldiers. Behind them came 3 tall, graceful beings that Marcus recognized as Xena's people. Their skin held the same bioluminescent quality, but their patterns were different, more complex. "Captain," Hayes exclaimed, relief evident in her voice. "We've been searching for weeks. When your emergency beacon activated, we—" She trailed off as she saw Xena pressed against Marcus's side, his arm protectively around her. The aliens spoke rapidly among themselves, their voices rising with what sounded like anger and concern. One of them, clearly a leader figure, stepped forward and addressed Xena directly. Her response was firm but respectful, and Marcus could hear his name mentioned several times. "Sir Hayes," said carefully, "we need to debrief you immediately. There have been developments since your disappearance. Tensions between humans and the Zilani have escalated. There was an incident at the neutral zone." Alien leader stepped closer, his luminescent patterns pulsing with what Marcus had learned to recognize as agitation. When he spoke, his words were accented but clear English. "The human speaks truth. Your people attacked one of our science vessels. Many died." Marcus felt Xena stiffen against him. She looked up at him with those beautiful violet eyes, and he could see the question there. Is this the reason she had been so afraid of him initially? "I don't care about politics or past conflicts," Marcus said firmly, addressing both groups. "This woman saved my life. More than that, she's taught me what it means to truly love someone. I won't leave her, and I won't let anyone hurt her." The alien leader's expression shifted to surprise, then something that might have been approval. He spoke to Xena again, and she responded at length, her voice growing stronger as she continued. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but he could hear the passion and conviction in her tone. When she finished, the alien leader looked at Marcus with new respect. "She tells us of your kindness, of how you protected her when she had lost all hope. She says you have shown her that not all humans are to be feared." Lieutenant Hayes lowered her weapon, confusion evident on her face. "Captain, I don't understand. Our orders are to extract you and return to base immediately." Marcus took a deep breath, knowing his next words would change everything. "Then you'll be returning without me, Lieutenant. I'm staying with Xena. Wherever she goes, I go." The implications of his decision rippled through both groups. The humans looked shocked, while the aliens seemed to be reassessing everything they thought they knew about human nature. Xena looked up at Marcus, her skin beginning to pulse with soft, warm light. She spoke to her people again, then turned to the humans and said in carefully pronounced English, "Marcus, ... good man. You choose love over fear. Maybe our peoples can learn." As the 2 groups began the complex negotiations that would reshape relations between their species, Marcus held Xena close and realized that sometimes being lost was the only way to find what you were truly looking for. Their love story would become the foundation for a new understanding between worlds, proving that connection could bridge any gap, even the vast spaces between stars.